Good evening, good afternoon, wherever you're coming to watch the World's Principled Leaders series. This is coming to you from the Stephen R. Covey Center, which is based at the Huntsman Business School at Utah State University. And I'm Lord Hastings, Michael Hastings, and I'm joined by my co-professor, Boyd Craig. And today we have a wonderful guest who we have great admiration for, who comes to us today from Cape Town in South Africa. This is Marisa Drew, who's responsible for global sustainability strategy at Credit Suisse. Welcome, Marisa. Welcome. Thank you.
A great pleasure to be here and in such great company.
Oh, thank you. You've been in banking for 30 years, although hard to believe it's possible, but 30 years, and you're listed as one of the most powerful, most influential women in banking in the world. Just give us a little bit of your journey when you were much younger. Is this what you wanted to do? Was this the ambition?
Absolutely not. I definitely was not one of those people who grew up wanting to be a banker since the day I could walk. And in fact, my journey was, I call it a long circuitous one. And I sort of characterized myself as a bit of a seeker, trying to find something where I could place my passion and my energy. And that was a pretty long journey. So I grew up as the daughter of an Air Force pilot and a mother who was encouraged that the only roles for her in business and life were to be a teacher or to be a nurse temporarily until she got married. And she was a strong-willed person that rejected that notion. And we can talk a little bit about where I drew inspiration from, but rejected that notion. But banking, finance was never in the frame for me. Watching my father serve his country, I think I started out with a mindset that I perhaps wanted to go into some form of public service. And the way I expressed that was first thinking about perhaps working as a politician. And I had the good fortune to be an intern in the State Department with the first-term congressman. And when I was going through that internship, one of the things that I observed is that the wheels of change move very slowly sometimes in politics. And you have lots of forces intervening, trying to maybe put pressure on you in terms of the decision making that you have. And for whatever reason, that just didn't sit well with me. So then I moved and thought, well, maybe I can serve my country in a different way, and do that in the diplomatic corps. And then I ended up in the State Department at an internship, working for the late great George Shultz, who was then Secretary of State, which was an honor and a privilege. But equally, I saw that in being a civil servant was a long, slow, sometimes tedious process to get to the outcomes you were wanting. And so then I rejected that and thought, well, maybe I need to go into business because maybe the pace is a bit faster. And interning in a summer business, which was in the insurance industry, started to inch me toward finance. But again, it wasn't fulfilling a lot of what I was looking for. I was looking for something that was dynamic and fast paced, because I say I'm a person with a lot of energy and a short attention span. And I wanted something where I could see a direct linear outcome from the effort that I was putting in. And after trying lots of things, a stint in private equity, a stint as an entrepreneur, I finally sort of landed in finance. And when I did, it was a moment for me. It was, so I believe life is a lot about trial and error. And I always say, my little catchphrase is half of life is figuring out as much what you don't want to do as it is what you do want to do. And how are you going to know that unless you experiment? And so for me, though, I tried to learn something for each of those little journey steps along the way. What are the things that really, really got me excited? And what were the things that didn't sit well with me or that I sort of would reject? And through each one of those experiences, I learned a little bit more about myself until I finally found the dream career. And once I did, never looked back. And most of my career has been in the field of raising capital for early stage, high growth companies. And that is a wonderful place to be because you are necessary. Lifeblood of capital to early businesses is absolutely critical. And in providing that capital, I feel like I have become a partner with my clients. In some cases, I feel like I'm part of the family as I've watched them grow up from young, early stage businesses into large, world dominating businesses over the course of my 20 or 30 years. And that has been incredibly fulfilling for me. And as I say, once I found that passion, the years have literally disappeared. I really can't believe I've been in this business 30 years. So there you go.
Great expertise. But just take us back. You just hinted at it in your opening remarks that what were your early inspirations, and what were the
Yes.
drivers for you personally? And when you've said that, are they still the same drivers now?
Yes, I would say so. There's a guiding North Star in a way that came from a combination of both my parents. Because we didn't come from means, I saw my father being a, very, very dedicated workaholic, but also believed that he was serving a higher purpose and a calling and a mission. And I think all the way through my life and my career, I wanted to feel like I was part of something that was mission driven. And that may, maybe for your audience, say, how can you reconcile the concept of banking, which doesn't always have the best reputation, with a purpose and a mission and a higher calling? But when I actually think about what I've been doing over my career, these 30 years, it is providing capital for companies who are going to become world leaders and help economies tick. I mean, it's a necessary part of, why we're all here today and why we're as fortunate as we are, is because we've been able to foster and nurture business. And so that is a little bit, maybe taken from watching him think about a mission-driven guide in his life and career, and then translating that into my field. And then on the other side with my mother, having watched and heard her story over and over again over the dinner table, which was she was very, very keen and interested in the food world. And she had a vision for putting cooking shows on television. And you have to remember that when she was sort of starting out in this early phase of her life and career, there was no such thing. So things that we know, the Food Network, I say effectively, she started the Food Network because she ran a cooking school. We had all the great chefs running through our house all the time. So I was very privileged in the food arena. But this vision that she had to put cooking shows on TV, she went round to the network television producers at the time, and there were only 4 major networks in the US at that time, and was rejected. They were 99% run and dominated by men. And they said, no one would ever watch a cooking show on TV, go away, what a silly, ridiculous idea. And she was absolutely determined that to somehow find a way to actually produce shows for TV that were all about food and cooking. And so after she was rejected by the for-profit network, she ultimately landed in the public broadcasting arena. So PBS was in where we were in the States. And they had to put shows that were in the public interest on TV. So they gave her the lousy 11 p.m. on a Thursday slot. And it turned out that show was wildly popular. And then, of course, all of the advertising companies or affiliates wanted to be a part of this thing that was taking off like a rocket. So the cookery companies and the spice companies and so on. So then they started coming and saying, how can we get involved? And the birth of, I honestly believe, the Food Network started somewhere in my mom's kitchen. But what did that all teach me? That taught me perseverance. It taught me if you really believe in a dream, you should pursue it. But it also told me that as a woman in business, it may be pretty hard because the way I would have a vision for something may not be the same thing that men who would largely be in positions of power would see things. And so I guess it's informed me throughout my life. And I guess I feel very privileged to have had a great run in the financial services field. And I've also viewed it a little bit as my obligation in a way to give back. And so I've spent a good 25 plus years trying to think about ways that I can bring women up in business and particularly in financial services, because it's been a wonderful career for me. I want to pay that forward. So all these little snippets of those life experiences, in addition to my parents, I think have helped me along this journey.
What a brilliant story around the cooking show, because all those food programs now are abundant on television.
And it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, by the way.
It all started in your kitchen. That's absolutely amazing. Well, one of the things I've always seen you do, Marisa, is you have an incredibly clear focus on empowering people. You're empowering women, but you also choose little businesses that can become big businesses, and you've seen many flourish, and that's part of the engine of excitement in your life. Just maybe pick one that comes to mind now that you really see making a big impact in the world, that's driving sustainability and value.
Wow, there are so many. And this is one of my great privileges because while I had a very traditional career in financial services over a long, long period of time, I would say almost the culmination of 30 years of banking has now landed me in this position of and role in sustainability. So I have an incredible platform and a privilege to try to foster, just as I did when I was banking the traditional companies, foster in many cases what we call these disruptive companies who are solving systemic problems, whether they be environmental or social. That is my mission and my purpose, is to mobilize capital either for environmental or social purposes and outcomes. And so in that capacity, what I love is that I surround myself every single day with purpose-driven, mission-driven businesses that are setting out with a very, very clear and crisp agenda that they want to tackle a tough problem. And what gets me excited is I think many times people think of systemic problems as being problems that you can't have a sustainable business or a profitable business around those topics, particularly in the S in ESG. Social is a little qualitative, a little amorphous. How can you make money and solve a social problem? But I'm seeing these business models every day. So I'll give you two. So you'll have to allow me to give you two. One is in the environment and one is in the S. In the environment, what I'm getting really excited about is that today the way we produce, consume, package, and waste food is fundamentally unsustainable. Unfortunately, in the US, the statistics are pretty awful. 40% of the fresh produce that we produce gets wasted. You think about that, the logistics involved in getting the food to the location, the carbon emissions, what it takes to produce the food, and then we waste it. I mean, all of this is just not going to be able to support a planet of 11 billion people. And every day I'm seeing the combination of technology and entrepreneurial mindset tackling some of these bits of the food chain problem. And one of the most exciting ones that's happening right now is the creation of meat and seafood from stem cells of animals. So effectively, what you can do today, and we are just on the verge of commercial products being on our shelves, we're this close to having these products. But if you think about how profound this is, what are some of the biggest issues that we face in the environment today? We all love meat, and we are a meat-based society, and we consume a whole lot of it. And yet, livestock, in particular beef, is a very, very destructive thing for the planet. It takes an enormous amount of water, and we're facing water shortages. The land degradation as we cut down more and more natural resources to provide space for livestock, and then the methane that the animals produce in the air as they're effluent, all of that bad stuff. If you create a steak or beef from a stem cell of an animal, it's basically in a lab in a completely cleaned pharmaceutical style environment, and you need no water. There are no hormones, no antibiotics, no land needed. And we can actually, in due course, produce this at scale very, very cheaply. It'll be cheaper in every respect, ultimately, than what we produce today. And yet it's completely clean, and it'll be a healthier product for us as well. Profound for the world. So that's an E version. I'll turn maybe to an S version, which I think is also fabulous, because this is where it gets a lot trickier. People say, how can you have a profitable business? And as an example, focusing on people at the base of the pyramid. So in the lowest economic strata. I can tell you every single day I'm coming across entrepreneurs that are saying my addressable market is trying to serve this population. Sometimes it's with access to goods and services. It could be quality healthcare. It could be education. And what I have found and observed, because most people say, oh, that's the purview of government or charity or philanthropy. When you are very, very focused and you think about solving a defined problem, you can create a very respectable, profitable business. And I want to be very clear, this is not predatory pricing or taking advantage of people. It's providing necessary service or access, but you're focusing on them as your population. You re-engineer your business model to make money serving that population. It's not taking a traditional business model that is maybe designed for a wealthier population and morphing it into lower income strata. It's completely re-engineering. So an example that I can give you of a company that we work with today is focusing on healthcare delivery. Normally, if you look at hospitals, just hospitals in the West, your ratio of operating theaters to beds is a very high number of beds, very few operating theaters. That's the old model. You treated somebody in the West very well, you spent the night, and you had all the services that go along with that. When you're working in the developing markets at the base of the pyramid, what you want to do is almost like industrialize the operating theater. So you have virtually no rooms and you have loads and loads and loads of operating theaters. And you could say, well, gee, is that going to result in lesser quality healthcare? Well, in fact, it's the opposite, because the surgeons in this particular hospital have more experience because they're seeing more cases, because their throughput is so much higher that you can afford to charge very, very little. So it's low margin, but high volume. Fascinating concept. And these businesses are very, very profitable, but serving huge swaths of the population that could never afford the traditional model of healthcare. And these are the kinds of things that are incredibly exciting that I get to see every day. So I know I took a lot of time describing that, but I get so excited about these companies to see that they're making a difference in the world and doing it in a profitable and sustainable way.
Those are two very, very, very pressing issues right now: the health reality and also the food reality. And for you to be in a banking organization and able to tackle that through investment models, that's very fulfilling, hugely fulfilling. So
it is.
I know that my co-professor, Professor Craig, he's got one or two questions he wants to ask you as well.
Marisa, such a pleasure to have you with us. Our students that are with us today really aspire to be principled leaders in their future of high impact. And we know, like all of us, that inevitably we will face great challenges in life, in our business, and setbacks. Would you be willing to share an experience from your life when you faced a significant challenge or setback, and some guiding, anchoring principle in your life that helped you work through that?
Sure. I believe in being very candid and open, because the learning journey is one that, if I can impart some of the mistakes and issues that I faced and give a little pearls of wisdom to somebody, then hopefully, we're all better for it. One of my probably biggest setbacks is something that I've also been public about in Sheryl Sandberg's Lead In effort. She asked me to talk about a time in my career where I faced a real obstacle or hurdle. And the one that was pretty devastating for me is I was moving along the career track in investment banking, and I was doing all the right things. I was a high producer. I was coming up the ladder. I say that I was, the one firm person, and I said I had the logo of my institution at the time, sort of tattooed on me somewhere, because I was that kind of one firm person. And the time came when my boss left, who was a group head running the group, and you're now facing a succession plan or issue. And in that particular instance, everybody came to me and said, well, you're the natural shoe-in, you're the highest producer, you are the one firm person, and this job's obviously yours, it's a shoe-in, blah, 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 blah. And I was not selected for the job. And I was utterly devastated on the one hand, but I was also humiliated because everybody thought that this was such a screamingly obvious thing, and then it didn't happen. And I have to tell you, that was a moment for me where, it crushes sort of your vision of yourself. You have your in your mind, that trajectory and all those sorts of things. And I, had to do a whole lot of soul searching. And in that instance, what I needed to do to satisfy myself as I regrouped was to understand, was there a perception gap? Did I have a view of myself that was different than somehow? Was I missing something? Or was it just politics, or was it just life, and so on? So, I definitely had a moment where, you tend to, I think, in the moment, at heat of a moment, want to do something very reactionary. And that was my first inclination. Well, I'm just going to leave, and, this kind of thing. And you do all this, and that's just sort of human nature. But I forced myself to sort of step back and say, what's the bigger picture here? And is there something I can learn from this? And I then systematically went around to all my stakeholders and peers and asked the questions, is there something I'm missing? I want you to be honest with me, and so on. And in the end, this isn't the greatest answer, but life is not always fair. And the person who selected the person to be the successor knew the individual and had worked with them at another organization, and they were close. And often you promoted your likeness, and that's a fact of life. And I had to decide in that moment whether I was okay with that, and or how I was going to deal with that. And I sort of, when I look back, I was that one firm person, and I never looked up from my organization because I was just on a trajectory. but it forced me to look up and say, well, maybe, because I have a contract with myself in my head that I always say, I think of my life as two scales, that is, I need to get as much out of what I'm putting into my job as I put into it. So as long as those things are in balance, then I keep doing what I'm doing. And I don't mean you do this every day. I do it sort of in a 6 months check-in. I say, because I'm an all-in person. And what I love about my job and my role in my business over all these years is I've been so incredibly self-actualized along the way that those scales have never been out of balance, which is why I keep doing it. But in that moment, they were out of balance. I felt that what I was giving, I was not actually going to be getting back. And at that moment, I looked up and I started to entertain opportunities outside that organization. And for the first time, those things started to come at me. And had I carried on, if I had not had that moment, I can guarantee you I would have never risen to the point where I was running investment banking, which I ultimately ended up doing, and one of the few women that ever ran an investment banking practice. And so sometimes, you do need a setback to sort of give you that nudge to think maybe a little bit differently. And it was, calculated risk for me to move. But, sometimes that little nudge is the thing that kind of gives you that next ability to propel forward. And I also look back and I think that in hindsight, you can either let a setback consume you and crush you, or you can take something from it and let it make you, in effect, a stronger, better person. So I guess if that's, one thing I can share, because, life is not linear. We all want to think that it goes like this, but it sure doesn't. You hope it goes in this trajectory, but it's probably going to do a lot of this. And, when you hit those moments where life is unfair, or it's just not going to go your way, or you made a horrible mistake, or whatever went wrong, you need to figure out a way to regroup, reset, and define your options, and then figure out a way to move forward.
Vital insight. Thank you so much, Marisa, for being so open and vulnerable. That'll be a great gift to our students. So thank you. Back to you, Michael.
So, Marisa, it's so easy to think of banking as almost a sort of amoral space, and especially investment banking, because you don't have a front door to which most people can easily go. And as you've thrived within banking, it seems to us that you've focused on how you can leverage the opportunity of finance to deliver a bigger, better good. How would you describe the atmosphere that you work in, and how do you change it to be more principled?
I think so much of it is about helping people understand what the purpose is of what you're doing every day, and seeking a purpose, right? I mean, if you're just sort of floating in the ether and just go on the grind every day, I think it's a very hollow existence. And it doesn't lead to self-actualization or self-fulfillment. It doesn't matter how much you make, if you generally don't believe that you're doing something that is beneficial every day. And I guess what I've tried to do along the way is satisfy that for myself, back to, even in traditional banking, that concept of providing that lifeblood capital. And in today, where it seems a whole lot more obvious because, I do get up every day and I feel like I've got a mission to try to save the world, the planet, or social inequities. And that's an easier thing to articulate. But it's hard, every day you need to sort of sometimes check in with yourself and ask if you are still on that mission. And I think that that's what I try to do with my teams, is in those times that are hard and when the markets are cratering or when something goes wrong, step back and say, what's our purpose here? And what's fascinating is, and what we find now as purpose-driven leadership is coming to the fore, because it used to be, I think the conventional belief was, purpose and profit are in two different buckets. And I think the recognition, and we're all taught that, by the way, in my business school career, these two things do not belong together. That was a big miss, because I frankly think that purpose-driven leadership leads to absolutely better outcomes and ultimately more sustainable businesses. And why? Because they're going to create a more sustainable society, right? The trajectory that we've been heading on, whether it was environmentally or with all the social inequities that we have, this is not sustainable. And we're seeing it manifest itself in all these ways. So I guess circling back to what I do every day, I do feel privileged that I feel like we're stepping in and solving those problems. But, it's not always clear what the path is. So what I've said to my teams is to think in some ways, when we think about very concretely what we're trying to do every day, is we try to use frameworks to help guide us. And the UN Sustainable Development Goals, in my case, in my business, is what guides us, because that's how to characterize and categorize the world's biggest challenges, whether they're environmental or social, and then challenge ourselves to look at those SDGs. And what I say to my teams is, on the one hand, let's look at these SDGs and ask ourselves, are they investable? Because we are in the finance business, because not everything is necessarily a for-profit and investable SDG, but where we think they are, let's ask ourselves, where can we take what's already something that's going well and magnify it, amplify it, do more of what's already better. So in the environment, that could be, we need more wind and more vehicle electrification and more solar. That's fantastic. Let's keep doing that. On the complete other end of the spectrum, I get to challenge our teams and I say, where there is a dearth of capital, where there's an SDG that's underinvested and it fundamentally should be investable, why don't we challenge ourselves to roll up our sleeves and try to bring our entrepreneurial spirit and our structuring skills and everything else to the table to really get stuck in and try to change the equation. And if I can tell you which is more gratifying of the two, this latter one is a heck of a lot harder, right? Because the book hasn't been written and it's really, really hard. And there's a lot of experimentation and trial and error and what have you. But boy, when you hit it, it is sweet. And one perfect example of that is the ocean space, which is SDG 14, or life below water. Michael knows this, but it's the second least invested of all the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We had to ask ourselves, well, why is that, given how important the oceans are to planetary health, human health, to feeding us and all of that? And fundamentally, when we got stuck into it, it was because there were not enough investable opportunities for people to put capital to work in businesses that would generate a sustainable return. And we set out to change that equation. And we used our structuring expertise and a lot of collaboration with actors across different segments of what I call the holistic ocean space to come up with some phenomenal investment opportunities. And what's been gratifying to us after multiple years of investing our time and effort into this space, we're really hitting it. So we've got some funds now that are galvanizing capital in scale, directing toward ocean health. And this is where just the excitement and the adrenaline rush comes in, right? Because we're galvanizing hundreds and hundreds of millions of capital to a precious resource. And we feel like we are really making a difference in the world where it's desperately needed.
Marisa, you're just a wonderful example in the banking world, in the investment world, but just as a person who has focused hard on the things you need to and you want to achieve. And you're looking at outcomes, not just wild ideas, but you're turning great ideas into positive deliverables. And so that's a tremendous encouragement to our students and to all of those who've been watching with us. So on behalf of my co-professor, Professor Craig, and myself, and all of you who've been with us on the world's principal leaders from the Utah State University Huntsman Business School, thank you for joining us. And thank you to Marisa Drew for her time and her stories and her quality of life. Thank you so much. See you again soon.
It's a real pleasure. Thank you very much. And it's an honor to be here with you. And best of luck to you and all of your students. You can lead a sustainable life.